Hi, and welcome. I'm Anna the Wolfe, and I'm so glad you joined me today for the ninth in a series of transformative tales. On the last leg of our journey, we were in a meadow and met the warbler. And after that wonderful, wonderful song that she sang, we decided it was time to get back on the trail and head to a new destination. And so you hiked over rivers and through valleys and up and over mountains. And after several weeks of hiking, the terrain entirely changed. And you were in a new landscape like you'd never seen before. And it was a vast desert. And the desert had its own forms of life that you could appreciate. And so you thought, this is a place I'd like to stay for a while. And so you found a rock outcropping and you set up your tent back in that area and thought you would hang out there for a while. And so you did. And the moon rose and there were stars like you had never seen before in the night sky. They were absolutely brilliant. It was such an amazing experience camping in the desert. And all through the night you heard slithering noises. And when you woke in the morning, you went out and all around your tent in the sand, you could see little slither marks. And you thought, I wonder what creature made those. So you went out just to survey the land and you came across a snake. And the snake was just so beautiful. You'd never seen anything quite like it. She had beautiful patterns all over her body. And you asked her, Snake, is this your domain? And the snake said, yes, this is where I live. I'd love to introduce you to all my friends. And the snake was so magnanimous. She called in all the desert creatures, and one by one, she introduced you to everyone she knew. You got to meet coyote and scorpion and several different varieties of lizards. And there was an owl that was way up in the top of a cactus. And there was a roadrunner. There was all sorts of creatures, and they all called her friend. And Snake said that she had been circling your tent last night and hoping that you would come out to meet her because she really wanted to share some of her good food with you. You thanked her for all of her kindness and consideration. And then you noticed something about Snake that was a little different. It looked like she was having some trouble seeing. She was bumping into some rocks and bumping into some prickly cactus. And as time went on and your conversation continued, Snake said she just wasn't feeling herself that day and that perhaps you could forgive her. And so you and she went and sat down underneath a very large prickly pear, and she told you all about her life and all about what it was to be a desert creature, and that it was a hard life, but it was a beautiful life. And she was so glad to be a desert creature and was glad that you'd come here to witness it. And then you noticed she just wasn't looking very good. It's like some of the color drained from her. She said, I just am not feeling well. And you said, oh, that's okay. And she continued telling her about her life and times, and you came to understand that Snake was exceptional. She was the kind of friend that anyone would want. She was loyal, she was courageous, she was generous. She was the kind of animal that we all hope to be, really. And then Snake said, you're just going to have to beg my pardon. I think I'm going to head back down into my den. I'm feeling really uncomfortable all of a sudden. And you noticed all of the color had drained from her entire body. She could barely see there was like a milky film over her eyes, and she was bumping into cactuses, and she was bumping into other creatures, and she was bumping into rocks, and she was becoming more and more restricted. And it looked like there was some kind of something gusseted around her, and it was tightening and tightening on her. And she looked very uncomfortable. And she started getting a little crabby, actually. She started saying, "I've got to go now." You asked her a question. She said, "No, I'm serious. I'm leaving." You're like, "Oh, whoa, okay. I totally give you your space." And as she started trying to feel her way back to her den, Vole walked up and said, "Hey, what you doing, snake?" And all she heard was, "You ugly snake." And she reared back her head and she struck. And she killed Vole. And Vole fell over, and all of the desert creatures saw what she had done. And they said, "Snake, you've killed one of our own. You know the laws of the desert. You've killed Vole." And Snake, not knowing what to do, just slithered as madly as she could and just darted down into her house. And you watched as she shot down the hole, and she threw herself from side to side on the entrance, scraping and writhing and tearing at her own flesh. And down she went. And you sat outside listening to hope she was okay down there. And you heard her crying. And she felt sorrowful for what had happened, for what she'd become. But she couldn't change that. So as the night wore on and you sat there listening, you saw a torch in that beautiful starlit night. And then you saw 2 torches. And then you saw about 5, 6, nearly a dozen torches show up, marching through the desert. And they all showed up outside of Snake's den and said, "Snake, get out here. It's time for retribution. You killed Vole. And I know you're going to kill the rest of us. You're just a no-good snake, and you're up to no good down there." And Snake was in the middle of a transformation and couldn't even answer. And so you sat there wondering what on earth to do. And that's when somebody put a torch to the edge of her hole and lit some of the straw on fire. And you stamped it out and you said, "That's enough. Stop." But they wouldn't stop. And normally, I stay in the shadows, being a silent witness. But not on this night. Snake was far too vulnerable. I slipped into my second skin and became a full wolf. And I ran out from behind the outcropping, and I stood over Snake's hole. I said, "Don't you come near this hole. Stand back." And they said, "Give her to us. You don't know what you're doing. She's dangerous." I said, and I turned as they circled me, and I turned trying to keep them in my eyes. And Scorpion stung me in the leg. And then I was limping and turning. An owl swooped down and scratched at my face. I said, "Get back!" And each one in turn swiped and clawed and stung, and the fire ants marched between my toes and nipped them. And I was losing my battle to protect this creature. And that's when you put on your second skin. And you said, "Enough! Enough! We all know Snake is good." And they said, "No, she's not good. Look what she's become. She's no one we recognize. She's not even of the desert anymore." And so I stood over Snake's chamber, and you circled me in your ferocity. And like this, we spent the entire night. You defending me defending her. And we passed the entire night. And when morning came, everyone dissipated and went back into the desert. And Snake very slowly came up out of her chamber. And her eyes now had no more glaze. She had shed her old skin. She'd burst forth out of it after a long and agonizing night. And she was magnificent. On her back, there was a pattern of unending, repeating patterns. They went on and on and on. And she was new again. Until the next time. And that is the end of this story. And I hope that you've enjoyed this tale of transformation and that you will join me, Anna the Wolfe, on the next chapter of Modern Myths. And thank you so much. Goodbye.